So today we are diving into kind of the hidden libraries of penetration testing. If you've ever been curious about the actual workflow behind what you see in movies, that moment, reverse shell tops, yeah, it's not that simple. There's this whole complex, meticulous process, usually with tools like MSFvenom.
Right. But the security world, it rarely leaves a complex task unautomated. Our mission today is a deep dive into the technical side of a pretty powerful open source tool. It's designed to take all of that manual complexity and just reduce it to a simple menu. We're talking about a tool called TheFatRat.
And we're going to unpack its architecture, right? Look at its automation capabilities and follow the surprisingly detailed steps involved in generating a payload for a target system.
Yeah, and we have to start where all the source materials start, with the ethical boundaries. The functionality we're discussing is strictly for educational purposes, for defensive training. The sources are really clear on this. Using any of these tools to attack targets without explicit mutual consent is illegal. We're analyzing the blueprint here so we can understand the defense.
Absolutely. We're looking at the architecture of the challenge that cybersecurity pros face every day. Now, the Fat Rat. I mean, it sounds like a character from a 90s cartoon, but based on the community around it, this tool is, well, it's anything but a joke.
It's an automation powerhouse. It lives on GitHub under Screetsec TheFatRat, and the popularity is staggering. We're talking over 10,000 stars and nearly 2,600 forks. That kind of attention isn't just curiosity. It shows a real reliance on this thing in the training community.
So why do people gravitate towards this? I mean, Metasploit is already out there. What specific niche is the Fat Rat filling?
It's all about mass simplification and cross-platform compilation. With MSFvenom, you have to meticulously specify your payloads, your encoders, everything. The Fat Rat. It just compiles malware with popular proven payloads like the Meterpreter reverse TCP with just a few clicks in a menu.
And it's not just a Windows thing, right? That cross-platform reach seems like a huge feature.
It absolutely is. The sources detail just how extensive its compatibility is. It generates executables for Windows, ELF binaries for Linux, Mach-O for Mac, and, this is the big one, APK backdoors for mobile devices.
Okay, could you just quickly clarify that? For listeners who might not be deep into mobile security, what exactly is an APK backdoor?
Sure. So an APK is an Android application package file. It's basically the format that's used to distribute and install mobile apps. When we say an ATK backdoor, we're talking about a malicious version of an app, or what looks like a new benign one, that when a victim installs it, has a hidden payload inside. A payload designed to give an attacker remote access to their phone. That level of mobile targeting is a major draw.
So beyond just making things simpler, what else makes it stand out? We hear about automation, but what about evasion?
Evasion is really a central pillar of its whole design. I mean, the language around it promises you can easily create payloads that can bypass most antivirus software. But, even if we take that promise with a huge grain of salt, and we definitely should, it's the utilities around it that are genuinely insightful, from an anti-analysis perspective at least.
Like the file pumper you mentioned. That sounds almost comical. Just make the file bigger.
It's a deliberate technique. The file pumper is designed to just inflate the size of the executable, sometimes dramatically. And this isn't just for fun. It's a tactic to try and trip up automated analysis systems. A lot of sandbox environments that are used for dynamic malware analysis have size limits, or they prioritize smaller files. Making the file arbitrarily large can also slow down any manual reverse engineering, which buys the attacker time.
That's a key insight. So it's not just about the payload itself, it's about making the whole environment hostile for the defender's tools.
Precisely. And on top of that, it has some networking intelligence built in. It can automatically detect your external IP and your network interface, so you don't have to keep looking up your ELO host. Plus, it can automatically create autorun files, which, believe it or not, are still a threat vector for USB or CD-ROMs in certain, corporate environments. It just streamlines every single step.
So the Fat Rat bundles all this functionality for efficiency and evasion. But if that sounds complex, the sources say the setup is actually pretty simple for an ethical hacking student. How do you get it running?
It follows pretty standard Linux tool protocol. You use git clone to get the source repo, cd into the directory, and then run setup.exe. There is one critical requirement, though, that the documentation really emphasizes. You must run it from a root terminal. You need sudo su or similar elevated permissions, which, again, just underscores the deep system access you need for these kinds of activities.
And once it launches, you get a main menu. The documentation shows a bunch of options. Option 1 is for a standard MSFvenom backdoor, but Option 6 really jumps out. It promises a fully undetectable payload.
Yeah, option 6 explicitly says, create fully undetectable backdoor with FUDWin. That win there means it's tailored for Windows systems, using techniques to evade Windows defenses. The promise of FUD fully undetectable is a massive selling point, but it's also where the tool shows a crucial self-preservation mechanism.
You're talking about that mandatory warning that pops up right before you create anything.
Yes, the tool gives you an explicit, undeniable instruction. It says, don't upload the backdoors created with the TheFatRat to the virustotal.com.
Wait. So the tool itself actively instructs the user to hide its own creations from the biggest public database of malware signatures. What does that tell us about the speed of this cat and mouse game?
It tells us the tool knows its shelf life is entirely dependent on secrecy. VirusTotal, as you know, shares signatures with pretty much every major antivirus vendor. If a payload, even one claiming to be FUD, gets uploaded there, its signature is instantly analyzed, recorded, and distributed. It becomes detectable within hours. That warning is basically an admission that the payload's FUD status is a fleeting commodity, a momentary advantage that just vanishes the second it becomes known.
That perfectly frames the whole FUD caveat we saw in the source material. While the option's there, the transcript explicitly warns that because the TheFatRat isn't that new, the output most likely won't be fully undetectable. It's an exercise in diminishing returns.
That's the core lesson right there. Yesterday's FUD is today's signature. But, regardless of its detection status, the tool still offers a really clean technical workflow for establishing a connection. Let's walk through the example they detailed in the sources for targeting a Windows machine.
Okay, yeah. Take us through generating that specific payload.
So the sources demonstrated selecting a pretty lightweight option, that's option 2, which creates a C# PowerShell executable. Now, to generate this, the attacker has to provide 2 key pieces of information, the LH-host and the L-port.
And these are basically the destination details for the victim's machine, right? The call home instructions.
Exactly. The LH-host is the attacker's IP address, the home base the target system has to connect back to. The example used a private IP, like 192.168.1.12, and the L-port is the specific door or port number the attacker will be listening on, let's say 55555. Once those are set, the user just selects the standard Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP payload.
And the output, after all of that, is just one simple file, like redbackdoor.exe. It's compiled with all the C# and PowerShell code needed to make that remote connection. No complex flags required.
The tool handles all of that. It wraps the whole process up. However, and this is the crucial realization the source material emphasizes, the TheFatRat, for all its automation, does not automatically set up the handler. It doesn't set up the listener for that incoming connection.
So the payload is created, the trap is set, but nobody's actually home to answer the phone when the target executes it.
That's a perfect analogy. The human element, that manual intervention, is still needed to complete the mission. The key insight here is that even with this level of automation, the attacker still needs to manually set up that waiting session in Metasploit.
So after creating redbackdoor.exe, they have to quickly jump over to the S console, which conveniently the TheFatRat lets them launch directly from its menu using option 10.
Correct. And once they're inside Metasploit, the steps are all about synchronization. The attacker has to load the exploit multi-handler module. Then they set the payload to match what was compiled, which was Windows Meterpreter reverse its step.
And the LH-host and L-port have to absolutely mirror the settings they put into the TheFatRat earlier.
That synchronization is mandatory. The LH-host has to be 192.168.1.1, and the LPD has to be 55555. Once those parameters are set, the attacker just types exploiter run, and that listener is now actively waiting.
And the second, redbackdoor.exe, is executed by the target. The reverse shell connects. You get an immediate Meterpreter session.
Yes, in confirmation. The sources showed them verifying this by running the PS command for process status and just scrolling through the processes on the target's Windows 10 machine, and there it was, redbackdoor.exe running successfully, a clean demonstration of success.
This whole workflow brings us to the broader context. Why is a tool that we know has diminishing FUD capabilities still so integrated into formal training?
That is the critical question. The sources confirm that the TheFatRat's documentation is available in modules for the Certified Ethical Hacker, so CEH V9 and V10. It was also published in the International Journal of Cybersecurity and Digital Forensics. So this isn't some obscure tool from a dark corner of the web, it's standardized education material.
So why use an older tool? In a field that's evolving so fast, why not teach, zero-day exploitation?
Because the TheFatRat represents a reliable, established blueprint. It teaches the fundamental methodology, payload generation, configuration, listener management using known, verifiable components. Defenders need to understand the tools that are proven, reliable, and widely documented because those form the baseline of the threats they're actually going to face. Understanding TheFatRat is foundational knowledge for defending against anything conceptually similar.
That makes perfect sense. You study the weapons from past conflicts to understand how you need to design future armor. And of course, TheFatRat isn't operating in a vacuum. What other alternatives were mentioned?
Right, this is a very dynamic and competitive field. The documentation points to several major alternatives for backdoor generation and bypass, things like the Veil framework, Shelter, Unicorn, and the MSFvenom payload creator, or MSFPC. This whole thriving ecosystem just proves that the security market, whether you're on offense or defense, is constantly iterating on ways to simplify creating these critical payloads.
It really underscores that security isn't a single solution, is it? It's a constant, dynamic race between these tools simplifying attacks and security vendors updating their defenses.
Absolutely. The moment a tool like the FatRat automates a process, defenders have to automate their detection.
Okay, so let's quickly summarize our deep dive for you. We looked at TheFatRat, a widely used automated tool that dramatically simplifies Metasploit payload creation across Windows, Linux, Mac, and even Android. It has some powerful features like the file pumper, and it promises AV evasion, a promise, as the sources note, that gets outdated pretty fast due to its own popularity and age.
And we broke down that technical workflow, noting that crucial human element. The FatRat creates the payload, but the attacker has to manually set the multi-handler listener and Metasploit. You have to conceptually synchronize both halves of that connection before the Meterpreter shell can be established.
The core tension here is that this is a tool that's openly documented it's used to train defenders, yet its specific purpose is to subvert the very security measures they're building.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. Since the source material made it clear that the FatRat is not that new, and it's documented in formal certifications like CEH, what does this constant exposure and aging imply about the effectiveness and shelf life of any tool that promises fully undetectable capabilities? If the blueprint is public knowledge, how critically dependent is modern antivirus and security software on constant rapid iteration just to keep pace with known, established attack methods? That is the daily reality of the defense industry.